I want to talk about character creation and how it works within an RPG. Not in terms of like stats, but in terms of timing. Character creation is when players get excited about the adventure they're going to go on. They get excited about who they get to be and the kinds of journeys they get to have. So, if you ask them to make those choices before they really know what's going on, well, they're not going to make good choices. They're not going to understand what they can do. They're going to have a fantasy in their head that does not match the fantasy you're going to provide. That's why it's important to understand the timing of this kind of thing, the timing of how to create characters, and the way that that can be massaged, vectored, reinterpreted. Let's talk about some variants. Let's have some fun with it. I guess before we talk about variants, we're going to have to talk about the standard approach, which is, of course, you hit new game and you create a character. This is the worst approach. So this approach requires you to already understand everything. It requires you to already understand the kind of world that you're going to be going into, the kind of adventures you might have, the way that the mechanics work, the way that each species works, each class, each piece of equipment, each ability. You have to understand everything. You also have to understand the themes that are going to be available, things that don't work together, things that do work together. If you don't know any of that stuff, then you're not going to be able to make any meaningful choices here. You're just going to be like, can it be Gimli? And then you make a Gimli and you find out that you can't be Gimli and you have to start over. So this is an approach that only works because of the really freakishly incestuous, repetitive nature of most Western RPGs, where they're based on completely unsuitable tabletop rules that stretch back 20, 30, 40 years. That approach is not my favorite, and it's also really uninviting for new players. Even if players think they know what's going to happen, they might be more familiar with D&D rather than Pathfinder, and they'll get confused, and they'll be like, okay, we'll just take one of these stock characters. I don't really know what's going on. We'll take the wizard. We'll take the wizard. Let's go ahead and see what the wizard's got. We'll just choose some crap for the wizard. All right, let's customize the wizard so he suits our purpose more. Grow claws? Grow more claws? Why is his charisma 20 and his int 10? Oh, that's because this is Pathfinder, and sorcerer is a completely different term than wizard. Sorcerers are some kind of bards of magic. This guy definitely has 20 charisma. He's certainly not someone I'd punch within 5 minutes of setting off. Whatever our imagination brought us, whatever idea we were trying to choose, we're not actually choosing that. We're choosing something else because the game doesn't really offer us the kind of fantasy we thought we wanted. That's not necessarily bad. Offering up some new fantasies, some new ideas is a standard approach and is very good. You don't want to keep repeating the same thing over and over and over. It's a sign of stagnation. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean all Pathfinder and D&D based RPGs are bad. If I watch the next episode of Poirot, I'm not going to get upset that it features Poirot. But there are plenty of games that offer more distinct visions. For example, in Mass Effect, you can choose the kind of adventure you're going to be, but the way they do that is before you get into the statistical part, they ask you some leading questions. Oh, were you the person who survived that attack on the colony? Or were you the lone survivor of your squad? Or were you the hero that whatever? By choosing one of those, you actually read all of them. And you quickly understand that those are the kinds of adventures that can happen in this world, and therefore those are the kind of adventures you should look forward to. Those are the events that typically unfold. So maybe your character should have that in mind when you make it. Similarly, in Dragon Age, when you choose a class, it's not, I want a mage because mages go pew pew. No, it's, you chose a mage. That means you're oppressed by the state and you must defend yourself against endless claims of whatever. If you're an elf, it's not, I want to be the bow elf like Legolas. It's, if you're an elf, you are, bound to the state's slums and you must blah, 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 blah. By choosing these characters, you don't get a giant dump of numbers. you get told the kind of adventure you're signing up for. So even though I don't particularly like those adventures, they are adventures that speak, and they let you know what you're signing up for. And fundamentally, the same is going on here. Fundamentally, if I choose to be a high charisma sorcerer, I am signing up for a specific kind of adventure, and there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with it is that the game doesn't tell me that that's what I'm signing up for, or that it even exists. Now, some games get around this whole affair by delaying the character creation. Dragon Age and I guess if we want to call Saints Row an RPG, Saints Row does it too. You play as nameless characters for a while, and then you get to create a character, and you know what you're going to create because you know what kind of adventures are going to happen. You just had one. So you know what to expect because you just went through it. But this can also go wrong in games like Skyrim, where Fallout 3 or Fallout 4, where every single possible little detail of the world is spelled out in agonizing, boring repetitiveness. Welcome, stranger. Looks like you got yourself in a trap, an imperial trap. Do you know how to look left with the mouse? Do you know how to look right with the mouse? Do you know how to look up with the mouse? Do you know how to look down with the mouse? That's not part of our adventure. That's not telling us the kinds of cool shit that's going to happen to us. The only part of that sequence which actually informs our character creation is the fact that there's a big-ass dragon interrupting us getting executed. And that was the only part of that entire sequence that actually tells us the kind of adventure we're likely to have. So what I'm getting at here is that character creation is something that requires you to know the kind of adventures you're going to have. And you can embed that stuff before the character creation, or as the character creation, or as a leading question before the character creation. You don't have to just dump a whole bunch of stats on people, and you don't have to integrate it into the tutorial. It's not the tutorial, it's character creation. They are different. Let's talk about some variants. One variant is the character creation with a delay. In Dragon's Dogma, you create a character, your first character, but then after a little while you create your second character. Oh. And there's enough of a delay between them that you understand more the sort of world you're in when you create your second character, and you can sort of create that second character with the full knowledge of the role they're going to play in your adventure because your adventure has been unfolding for an hour or two already. Or how about in Baldur's Gate, where you create a second character and it's explicitly your love interest? That's fascinating because it tells you the kind of adventure you're going to have by giving you that kind of control over the kinds of things you're going to see. You know what role this specific character will play. It's a very specific role. It's not just, oh, party member number 3. It's a very precise setup. And that allows you to understand the kind of adventure you're going to have by creating the character. I think that's wonderful too. This is the sort of thing where you're massaging these things by changing the timing and the focus of when these character creations happen and what sort of role these characters are going to play in your role-playing game. This is also something that can go wrong, such as in this Solasta. I like Solasta, but I don't like its character creation. See, its character creation is a throwback to character creation systems I used to really like. When we click New Adventure, we don't go into character creation. We're asked to choose 4 characters from the character pool. Now we can make new characters for the character pool. Nothing too exorbitant about it. It's not like it's asking us to go and buy DLC or something. But fundamentally, it's taking the act of character creation out of the story that we're about to go on. Not only are we not informed about what kind of adventure we're going to have, we're explicitly told to get characters that could work in any adventure. Just go and grab some people you like. Let's go. It's like a buddy road trip, right? There's nothing explicitly wrong with that. Back in the day, this sort of thing was very, very common. You would lose a character while you were fighting, someone would die, and you had to bring in someone new, and they'd be level 1, and you have to work it through that way. And that sort of thing was surprisingly compelling. And that doesn't really happen in Celesta. It's a much more staid, sort of laid-back game. I expected that I was going to lose characters and have to pull in new characters from the character pool, but that never seems to happen. It just is an old aesthetic that they chose for some reason. I don't really understand why they chose to do this. The thing is, they could have gone all the way with this. They could have really pushed for the idea that this is a universe where there are thousands of adventurers. They're just these folks you know, right? You know, like that Watch Dogs Legion game, right? There's just people. And you can go get those people whenever you need them, right? In which case, they could have modernized it. They could have said, okay, well, this is the people in the town of Staidworth. And you can make new Staidworth civilians. And they could say, oh, well, you know, your friends, they also created some characters. Why don't you do a friend sharing? And then you can have a wider assortment of characters. You can choose some of the characters your friends made. You can sort of, you know, have some fun with it. Nope. Not a chance. Now, this sort of setup is commonly used for games where you're either going to have to replace characters midway through the game, or you're going to be using characters that are technically not allowed to be distributed by the devs, like, say, if we wanted to play as Raistlin, or whoever's popular these days. Then what we'd do is we would create a character like that, or we'd share it with our friends. Be like, oh, look, I created all of the characters from my favorite novel. Oh, here's a Harry Potter-based character setup. That doesn't really happen here either, does it? I don't see an import button. So what we end up with is this sort of strange choice that doesn't really actually do any of the things it's set up to do. And that's what I'm warning against. This is like the Fallout 3 intro of character design, where it doesn't actually work. It's got the right kind of concepts that could work if you set it up well, but then it doesn't actually do any of that setup, and it just kind of doesn't work. It doesn't add what it should be able to add. There are lots of other things we could talk about. I could talk about character creation variants all day, but my voice is giving out, and it's been 13 minutes. I think that's more than enough. So yeah, feel free to talk more about the kinds of setups you want to see with your character creation and how it makes you feel, because that's what we're talking about.